Hi everyone, just listening to that panel made me think, brilliant, they've teed us up really nicely there. Hi everyone, I'm Alex Rule, Head of Metaverse Technologies for PwC here in the UK, and most of my day is spent thinking and talking to clients about the business value of immersive technologies and the Metaverse technology stack. And I'm joined today by my brilliant colleague, Emmanuel Rivet. Emmanuel, do you want to?
Yes, thanks to The Economist, by the way, for having us. I'm Emmanuel Rivet. I'm a partner based in San Francisco, so in the center of tech, which led me to having the pleasure of leading our technology practice globally, as well as media and telco in the US. So very excited to be here.
Amazing. And I'm just waiting for our slides to come up, if we could have our slides. So our session, innovation versus cost cutting. Why not both? You know, I think this stat kind of really sums everything up. If my clicker works. It doesn't, so could you guys go to the next slide? Thank you. So 40% of CEOs don't think their business model will be viable in a decade. This is a stat that was released in our annual CEO survey, where over 4,000 CEOs of global companies were surveyed. That really speaks to the fact that we know innovation should be at the forefront, right? But in this economic climate where we are being asked to cut costs and save money, how do we go about this, right? How do we get that buy-in from boardrooms? And Em, I'm curious to know, you know, from your point of view, speaking to boardrooms, speaking at that very senior level in these kind of Fortune 1000 companies, what are you hearing in terms of how we get innovation through the door, I guess?
Well, and I think it will not surprise this audience that the current environment is driving a lot of uncertainties that's weighing on the CEO's agenda. If you think about the economic environment, the shifting of the social landscape, geopolitical landscape, regulatory landscape, there's so much uncertainties that CEOs are really struggling, and that's why you see this pretty impressive this year, 40% CEOs being really doubtful about the economic viability of their business in the next 10 years. But more interestingly is when you double-clicked on that statistics, what actually half of the CEOs we interviewed told us that one of the key factors that's weighing on that uncertainty in the next 10 years is technology disruption. And so that's interesting because it becomes a business survival imperative to invest in technology. And actually, CEOs, we learned, are not sitting on the sidelines because 3 out of 4, and that's our next survey output, are actually investing in upskilling their workforce, embracing automation and deploying emerging or advanced technology. So there is really an impetus for driving innovations within companies.
And that's it, right? So there is talk at that level. People know that it's important. People are investing. But what I'm hearing, even just speaking to a few of you out in the open over there, thinking about, well, we have the headsets in-house, or, we've tried things with virtual platforms, but once it's in-house, it kind of doesn't go anywhere, right? Like, it's kind of never gets out of the proof of concept stage. So how should we think about, when we are kind of deploying these projects, like whether it be immersive training or remote collaboration, how do we go to that next level of getting investment to then scale? That was a kind of a topic on the previous panel. Like, how do you scale once you prove it works?
I actually liked some of the comments in the previous panel. I think it was in the room as well that talked about return on investments. And so certainly today, any investments in the current cost-cutting environment requires a pretty solid business case. And I think there was also this very relevant comment in the prior session that we hear over and over, and we're trying to help our client think about technology not as an end by itself, but as a means to solve a business problem and trying to achieve an outcome. So it's like, what are you using the technology for? What are you trying to address? And then try to identify, because there is no really one measure, and we heard on the panel earlier, that's why I thought it was perfect tee up to your point. Like, depending on the business problem you're trying to solve, what are those metrics that are going to measure if you're making progress or not as you make those incremental investments in technologies? and prove that it has actually a beneficial impact and outcome. And just to summarize, maybe to just take a step back, there are really 4 categories of business use cases that we've seen so far being adopted by companies, in particular with XR and metaverse technologies. One is changing and transforming engaging employees and transforming the employee experience. That's one. The second one is engaging and changing the experience of the customer. The third one, and we touched on it with digital twins, is process optimization with potentially less waste, more efficiencies, et cetera, trying different scenarios and products designed in a virtual environment before moving to the physical environment. And then the fourth one, which could be really important with this profitable growth agenda that's top of mind for all CEOs and their investors, is potential new revenue path, whether the metaverse or the digital environments provide for a new channel to distribute your products, or really provide you with the opportunity to introduce new digital services and products, but always trying to measure the outcome.
Yeah, and make every dollar count, right? That's the thing. And you know, those 4 buckets, we have proven with our clients and internally at PwC that these are the 4 that are providing value. These are the things to focus on. So it's quite helpful to be able to kind of, you know, be able to know the research that backs up the impact that each of those kind of use cases has.
Now I'm going to ask you a question, because I think in all those buckets, the employee experience and transforming the work experience is a critical one, and I apologize, but we're consultants, so we do all kinds of surveys. And one metaverse survey indicated recently that 42% of executives are actually very interested in training and onboarding as the primary use case for the metaverse. So maybe when you talk about how we've measured that, you can perhaps share that with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, I know so many of you already in this room because we've been kind of at this for a while now, and VR training is the one that, you know, for the last few years has a proven return on investment. In fact, these are some stats from a report that we released where we were comparing virtual reality training versus classroom training versus e-learn training, right? So all the different methods. And actually, you know, you can see here, you know, almost 4 times more emotionally connected to content. So for example, we at PwC have had great success rolling out diversity and inclusion training using virtual reality, right? It's one of those things where actually, if you can put someone in the shoes of someone else, that subject is going to connect the impact, the catalyst of conversation, the action that happens after you come out of the headset is going to be much stronger if you feel emotionally connected to the content rather than just being told about different kind of, you know, the training or even like just watching an e-learn video. 4 times more focused than e-learning platforms. I think that one's really fascinating, right? And if you're an L&D, you know, person in the room, that is going to be a huge kind of factor to invest, right? Because actually, if you can prove that people are more focused when they're training, that's going to directly lead to, you know, less accidents, more retention of employees, you know, not having to invest time and money into retraining employees. I know there's a lot of sectors present, industries represented here today, where there is compulsory training, whether it's from a regulatory point of view or health and safety point of view. What would it mean if you could shave 1 to 5 minutes off of some of your training using this, because it's more effective, in fact 4 times faster to train, you know, 3 times almost more confidence in applying the learning? What would that mean for your business? All of a sudden you can start to quantify that. It goes from qualitative, the employees love it, which is important, right? Retention of employees is a really big thing we see when people kind of start to engage in different ways using remote collaboration tools. But actually, if you can quantifiably say this is going to save us X amount of money because people are going to feel more effective in their workplace because they've been trained well, I mean, the headsets, the platforms, the applications you're using, they pay for themselves, right? And the other use case I kind of touched on there is remote collaboration. Again, this is an area we've been seeing huge progress in. From both internally at PwC, we have our own global metaverse campus where we host events, teams come together, we host meetings in there. And even just, I had an anecdote last week in the office that there was a session being run by a team where it was a half-day event, And essentially, they saved about 10 grand just on hosting it in this metaverse platform. And they felt like the anecdotal evidence off the back of that was that people actually really loved it. Yes, it's not going to be exactly the same as us all being here in person, right? None of us think that the metaverse is going to totally replace in person. You can't beat this, but actually, especially when you're getting pressure on your ESG targets, sustainability being a big thing, this is going to be more and more a viable option and should be seen right here, right now. It's not the future. Right here, it's already offering huge cost reductions and benefits from efficiency and productivity. So that teases you.
Well, you touch on something really important, because when we're not running the surveys, then we look at other surveys. And All-Lab did a recent survey on the state of hybrid work, and they showed that 42% of the population aged 18 to 24-year-olds, they are expecting a more immersive work environment. So from a CEO's agenda, as we talked about earlier, if you want to be able, in an environment of scarcity of resources, challenge in retaining employee, you have to provide this experience to your employees. And once you put headsets and other VR, XR technologies in the hands of employees, that's how you unleash really what's possible, because they will then kind of incrementally think about what the potential use cases are.
Definitely, and that's it, right? And to someone on the panel earlier said, start small. Pick a use case, remote collaboration or XR training, great kind of use case. Diversity inclusion is a great one because it kind of transcends all kind of departments in an organization. It transcends all grades. So in our company, for example, the most senior people, the board of PwC have been through our training and new joiners go through it. So that's a great investment. And then once you've got the equipment, once you've built that muscle memory on how to deploy this stuff, then you can scale, right? But coming back to that idea of scale, coming back to that idea of, getting people on board and getting the investment and the backing required, right, in your organization. We've touched on the financial. Yeah. What other elements should people be considering in their kind of, their business case for this?
Well, I think, and again, someone teed it up perfectly in the prior panel, but in addition to the financial business case, there is obviously a need when it comes to technology and adoption of technology to build a responsible business case, I call it, meaning make sure that the technology, whether it's being developed or it's being used, is done so in a responsible fashion. A couple of weeks ago, we actually released what we call our XR responsibility framework, which touched on 9 criteria, and it will not surprise you, but obviously safety, privacy, security, interoperability was mentioned a little bit earlier, as well as sustainability, are some of those criteria that we would recommend be considered, because once you know what your risks are and you mitigate them, then you can much more confidently adopt and progress with the technology. So that would be the only thing to build into your plan.
Absolutely, and on this last screen, there's a lovely little QR code, so I expect to see a sea of mobiles go up. I will be offended if I don't see mobiles go up, thank you. So this is where you can find out a bit more about PwC's metaverse kind of activities, including the global efforts that are going on. Off the back of this website, you can then find some of those studies that we've been talking about. They're all listed. These are the kind of stats that are going to help you. If you're in this room, you're already convinced, right? We all know that this stuff is here to stay. This is the future and the present, and we should be investing today. But hopefully some of these reports, some of these stats are going to help back you up when you start to scale. So I know that we're out of time. That really is screaming at us.
That is really
let's just summarize quickly. What would be the one takeaway for everyone here to think about when it comes to...
I think you touch on it, but the time to act is really now, candidly, because if you're not staying ahead of the technology, experimenting with it, then the 40% that we saw about at the onset of the presentation, 40% of the CEOs who don't think their business is economically viable, that may prove actually right.
Yes, brilliant. And please come visit our wonderful team just outside this room. On the stand, we have examples of our XR training. So if you want to see some of those for yourself, you can see those, augmented reality data visualization and some other things. So please come and say hello to the team out on the stand. And thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much.